And if I offered you $1 million for one night with me? She stared at him in silence. No surprise, no disgust, just that still gaze that weighed more than any response. They were in the back of a 5-star hotel near the emergency stairs. The night was cold. The silence was broken only by the clicking of the parking lot's motion sensor lights. She had a dirty backpack next to her, and an expression that said she'd heard worse absurdities in her life. "Is this a joke?" she asked without raising her voice. "No, it's an offer." He spoke calmly as if discussing a contract, but deep down, something in him faltered. She wasn't the kind of woman who should be hearing this, and maybe that was exactly why he wanted to see her reaction. $1 million, immediate deposit, no strings after, you choose the place. She looked away toward the empty street, then back at him. "Is that how you solve everything? Throwing money until you get what you want?" "It works." The answer came out before he could think, like an arrogant reflex from someone who never had to explain himself. "And why me?" she shot back. "Because you don't look scared, and I'm bored. I don't expect anything from you, and you don't look like you expect anything from me. That's rare." She took a deep breath, looked down at her own feet, wrapped in worn-out sneakers, nearly split at the toes. When she raised her face again, there was a different shadow in her eyes. "Meet me at the hotel entrance at 9, but if you're 1 minute late, I'm leaving." She stood up, picked up the backpack, and disappeared into the darkness. Ryan stayed still, alone. It was the first time someone had accepted an offer like that, without asking a single thing. 2 hours earlier, he had been on the inner balcony of the casino, watching the floor like someone watching a play on loop. Men in suits toasted over contracts. Women in long dresses moved around like decorative pieces. Nothing there surprised him anymore, until she walked in. White uniform, tray in hand, exhausted expression. She wasn't one of the hotel's regular staff. No heels, no professional makeup. But she walked like someone who had cleaned up too much mess to care what anyone thought. Her heels slipped subtly on the polished marble. The tray nearly fell. Cutlery clinked. Almost no one noticed. Almost. "They're letting just anyone into the VIP floors now," one of the partners joked, laughing beside Ryan, but he didn't reply. He just kept watching. She picked up what had fallen, didn't apologize, didn't look at anyone, just squared her shoulders and moved on. In a hurry. With dignity. That image stayed in his mind, a misfit piece in that perfect setting. And maybe that's what stirred something in him, something he didn't even know still existed. The clock read 8:54 p.m. when Ryan stepped out of the private elevator and walked through the hotel lobby. His impeccable suit contrasted with the slight tension in his jaw. He was used to controlling rooms, people, decisions. But now, even after making the offer, he felt that control had slipped from his hands. She was there, at the door, in the same simple coat and the same worn-out sneakers. She didn't pose, didn't smile, just looked at him neutrally and said, "You're on time, shall we?" They got into the elevator together. The silence was deafening. "Do you have a name?" he asked. "You can call me you, that's already more than most people do." He let out a muffled, uneasy laugh. The doors opened on the penthouse. The apartment looked like it came out of a magazine. Glass everywhere, Italian marble, million-dollar artwork. But she didn't look around with wonder. She looked like she was sizing up a cell too expensive to feel safe. "Got water?" He pointed to the bar. She poured herself a glass, drank standing, then looked at him again. "What's your name?" "Ryan." "Okay, Ryan. You've got a big bed, the world at your feet, and a silence that screams. What do you want to start with?" He didn't know what to say. She sat on the couch, still wearing her coat, backpack at her side. No gesture of intimacy, no attempt to please. "You thought I'd undress like in a bad movie," she said. "You paid for a night, but you didn't buy who I am." "I don't know who you are," he admitted. "Good. If you did, maybe you wouldn't have had the guts to make that offer." She spoke like someone who carried too much pain to care about anyone's reaction. And Ryan, for the first time in a long while, felt something close to real discomfort. But nothing could have prepared him for what she would reveal next. She leaned back on the couch, took off her coat and placed it beside the backpack. Underneath, she wore just an old t-shirt and faded jeans. Nothing about her appearance suggested allure, invitation, or fragility. But there was firmness in her movements, like someone who'd long since learned not to apologize for existing. Ryan approached with slow steps, grabbed a bottle of whiskey from the bar, and poured himself a drink. The alcohol burned his throat, but he said nothing. She watched him in silence. "What do you really want?" he asked, staring into his glass. She took a moment to answer. "You already asked me that outside." "Yes, but now we're here, on your time, in my apartment. And you still haven't told me your name, or what you expect from this night." She stayed quiet a few more seconds, then stood up, walked to her backpack and pulled out a small cardboard box. Opened it carefully. Inside were medicine bottles. "My son takes this 3 times a day. His lungs are damaged. He's 3 years old. The surgery he needs costs more than 3 years of my salary." She placed the box on the table firmly. "Do you really think I came here to seduce you?" Ryan didn't answer. His eyes landed on the bottles, then on her. For the first time, the word guilt crossed his mind like a sudden shadow. "I came for him, not for you." She said it calmly, with a painful kind of peace. "You offered me money. I accepted. No questions, no demands, but not because I wanted to make you happy. It was survival, pure and simple." He leaned against the glass counter. The view of Las Vegas behind him no longer mattered. That woman had just stripped the polish off the night. "What about his father?" he asked in a softer tone. She looked at him. "Are you paying me to spend the night, or to tell you my life story?" He didn't respond, just looked down. "Doesn't matter," she went on. "He's not around, never really was." Silence. She returned to the couch, put the bottles back in the box, packed everything into the backpack with the same care. "I don't want pity, and I don't want your attention. I just need to make sure my son wakes up tomorrow with a better chance than he had today." "Do you always talk like this?" "Like what?" "Like someone who's seen the worst in everyone and still stands tall." She took a deep breath, then answered, "That's what happens when no one ever chooses you first. You learn to walk alone." Ryan turned his back. He needed distance, but her words clung to the glass walls like smoke. He remembered all the nights he'd spent small fortunes on women who laughed at the right jokes, who knew exactly when to touch his arm and say everything in his life was admirable. None of them looked at him the way this woman just had. No shield, no fear, and no effort. Dawn came without warning. The city lights flickered like a soulless mirage on the other side of the glass wall. She was asleep on the couch. Didn't ask to use the bed. Didn't touch anything. Didn't even take off her shoes. The backpack sat beside her like it was the only thing of real value she carried. Ryan watched from a distance, leaning against the side of the window, the whiskey bottle nearly empty, his gaze lost. It wasn't regret, he felt. It was something deeper, more unsettling. She wore no makeup, didn't ask what he wanted, didn't try to impress, didn't try anything. And still, she had knocked him off center. She hadn't told him her name, but now he knew her son's name. He knew the illness. He knew the reason she said yes, and none of it made him feel better, quite the opposite. It was as if, for the first time in years, someone had turned his mirror around, and he didn't like what he saw. She woke up a little after 5 in the morning, got up carefully, went to the bathroom, washed her face. When she came back, Ryan was still there, sitting, same clothes, same restless look. "I'm leaving," she said simply. "You don't want to know if I'll pay? You don't want to know if I slept with you?" Silence settled in. "I trust what you said, and you trusted that I'd show up. We're even." She walked to the door, paused for a second. "My name is Eliza." Ryan stood up. "Eliza?" She didn't answer, just opened the door and left. At that moment, he understood. She hadn't sold anything. She had given him the one thing no one else ever offered: truth. And now, the problem was knowing what to do with it. With that woman. With that name. And with the guilt that wouldn't go away. Ryan didn't sleep that night. Sitting on the edge of the bed, elbows on his knees, eyes fixed on nothing, He replayed every second of the previous night with a clarity that made him uncomfortable. Not because of her words, but because of the lack of defenses between them. It was as if Eliza had walked into his apartment, spoken truths no one dared to say, and left carrying a part of him. It was still early when Ryan typed her name into a private system known only to billionaires and top-tier executives. He cross-referenced data, searched her background, ran into gaps. But he found enough. Eliza Brooks, 32 years old. Current address: a room behind an industrial laundry in East Las Vegas. One registered child, Noah Brooks, 3 years old. Health status: confidential. Her file didn't say much, but the subtext screamed. 2 weeks before that night at the hotel, Eliza would wake at 5 a.m. to the grating sound of a cracked alarm clock. She had 15 minutes to get up, get dressed, and prepare her son Noah's first meal of the day. On that particular morning, he slept with shallow breaths, his chest rising with effort. She covered him carefully and slipped out without a sound. The laundry they stayed at, rent-free, was run by a woman named Patsy, who accepted half a day's pay in exchange for silence and a bathroom cleaning on Sundays. That was all Eliza could afford. That day, she was covering an extra shift at a budget hotel's cafeteria. After that, she'd try to make it in time to pick up Noah from the community daycare. When she didn't, he'd wait for her at the front desk, drawing with donated crayons and coughing like each stroke on the page cost him oxygen. The clinic doctor had been clear. Without surgery, his respiratory condition would only worsen. But the public hospital waitlist was long, and she'd heard the phrase, "There's nothing we can do," more times than she could count. She carried that truth with the same quiet dignity she had while scrubbing greasy dishes at 2 in the morning, not out of heroism, but out of necessity. Ryan stepped out of the rental car and crossed the street. No bodyguards, no sports car. He dressed like an ordinary businessman, a pointless disguise, but one that gave him a strange sense of control. The building where Eliza lived had no doorbell. The back door was metal, its paint peeling. He didn't knock, just watched. And after a few minutes, he saw a woman step out with a backpack and a child in her arms. It was her. The boy coughed softly, resting on her shoulder, a cloth doll clutched in his arms, pale face, deep circles under his eyes. She crossed the street unaware she was being watched. Her steps were firm, like every second of delay might cost something more. Ryan stood still for a while, staring at the empty sidewalk after they'd disappeared, and for the first time, he felt that maybe his offer had been dirtier than he dared admit. That night, Eliza returned home early. Noah had vomited during tutoring class, and the daycare director insisted she take him to the hospital. But the receptionist gave her the same weary look as always, only if it's a life-threatening emergency. She thanked her anyway. She already knew raising her voice only slowed things down. She bought a generic cough syrup, caught a bus, and headed home with Noah asleep in her lap. She laid him on the narrow bed, gave him the medicine, and sat beside him for over an hour, watching his chest rise and fall like someone waiting for the next crisis. Then she remembered the offer, the man, the money, and everything she still didn't know about him. Elsewhere in the city, Ryan returned to the penthouse where she had walked out just hours before. He couldn't get her out of his mind, not because of her clothes or the silence, but because of the way she'd reversed everything. He who always held the reins, she who never asked for permission. And now, a new question haunted him. What would he do with everything he'd learned, knowing she never asked for anything? What he didn't know yet was that Eliza was about to receive a call that would change everything. The phone rang shortly after 7. Eliza was sitting on the floor, her back against the wall, legs stretched out, holding a plastic cup of lukewarm tea. The shrill sound cut through the muffled silence of the room. Noah was asleep, lying on his side with a compress on his chest and a blanket that didn't quite reach his feet. She answered instinctively, bracing for bad news. No one called at that hour with good intentions. "Hello? Ms. Brooks? This is the Children's Intake Center. Your son's name just came up on our list." She held her breath. "Yes. Noah Brooks. What happened?" The voice on the other end hesitated. That alone made the floor feel like it was giving way. "We've re-evaluated his case based on the latest system updates. His pulmonary condition has worsened. He's been moved to emergency priority. But that's good, right? Yes and no. He's now on the urgent surgery waitlist. But there's a problem. The unit doesn't have the funds to cover the full procedure. We can only schedule the operation if the family can cover the anesthesia costs. How much? $14,000 by Friday. Eliza didn't respond right away. On the other end, the silence was interpreted as despair. Ms. Brooks? She swallowed hard. I understand. She hung up slowly. Her hand trembled, not from surprise, but from the same old weight. She looked at Noah, restless in his sleep, tiny fingers clenched around the blanket, breathing with difficulty. Every breath took twice the strength any child should need. Inside her backpack, the $100 bills were still tucked away. She hadn't told anyone, hadn't used them, not yet. She'd wanted to believe she wouldn't have to. But now, there was no choice. Ryan stared out at the city from the penthouse's glass wall. Las Vegas glittered like a drunken mirage. But to him it all looked dull, meaningless. Her name still echoed Eliza, and now that he had too much information, address, background, sick child, precarious life, he felt he knew less than ever about how to handle it. It wasn't just guilt. It was something older. A kind of emptiness she had revealed, not through force but through presence. She didn't try to convince anyone of anything, and yet she changed everything around her, including him. His phone vibrated. A short message from the private investigator he'd hired, just in case. Information confirmed. Boy, Noah, mother, Eliza, no legal ties to father, record of assistance attempts, no fraud. Ryan dropped the phone on the table. It felt like something had collapsed inside a building that looked fine from the outside. The problem now wasn't figuring out what to do. It was knowing that whatever choice he made would be final. Eliza got off the bus carrying Noah in her arms. He no longer had the strength to walk. He was feverish, breathing shallow. With every couple of steps, her heart pounded harder than she could control. She bypassed the laundry room they called home, asked the building owner if she could use the landline. She called the hospital again, asked about the surgery date, about deadlines, tried to negotiate. The answer was curt. No deposit, no scheduling. Emergency list only guarantees evaluation, not procedure. Eliza hung up. She returned the receiver slowly, as if any noise might trigger yet another problem. When she got back to the room, Noah was crying softly. She ran to him, lay down beside him, held him tightly. He was burning up. "Mommy, I can't breathe right." Eliza closed her eyes. 1 second, just 1 second to hold back the tears. "Shh, Mommy's here. It'll pass." But it didn't. It never did. Ryan paced back and forth, picked up the phone, put it down, picked it up again, squeezed his eyes shut, took a deep breath, then typed a message. "Eliza, I need to see you. Today, please." Deleted it. Rewrote. "You said you were doing this for your son. I understand. If you'll let me, I want to help." Deleted that too. In the end, he left the screen blank and went to bed without sending anything. The next morning, the city would carry on at its usual, indifferent pace, but Eliza's life hung on a price any guest at last night's casino could cover, and the man who could change everything still didn't know how to handle what he felt. Eliza stayed awake through the night, not by force, by habit. Sleep had long been a luxury she couldn't afford. Noah lay asleep with his head in her lap, his chest rising with difficulty, each breath a battle. His fever fluctuated between high and dangerous. She had already done everything she could at home. Cool baths, compresses, generic meds. The money from the proposal was still untouched. But with each second it felt less like a safety net and more like a ticking time bomb. She didn't want that money to be tied to desperation. But now, there was no room left for pride. The next morning, Eliza arrived at the children's hospital before the doors even opened. She took a number and waited. Noah in her arms, a folder of documents in one hand, an expired prescription in the other. The triage doctor recognized her. He'd seen Noah months earlier. His condition has progressed, and not in a good way, he said, scanning the charts. The last CT scan shows advanced lung damage. He needs surgery as soon as possible. Eliza nodded. She already knew. She just needed someone to confirm it. What if I get the money? The doctor hesitated. Eliza, the wait list is full, but with payment, we can fast-track the procedure as priority released. That would cut the wait down to a week max. And if I don't? The doctor didn't answer right away. He lowered his eyes, then said in a neutral tone, he won't survive another 2 months without the procedure. It was like hearing a sentence read aloud in a whisper. Eliza didn't cry. She gathered the scans, thanked him, and left. Outside, the sun was shining like nothing was wrong in the world. Ryan spent the morning locked in a meeting room, signing papers he didn't read and smiling at shareholders whose names he didn't remember. He had a company to run, an empire to maintain. But that day everything felt like background noise. He kept trying to convince himself it wasn't his problem. But the image of Eliza, standing in that cramped room, setting the medicine box on the table, wouldn't leave his mind, no matter how hard he tried. Later that afternoon, Eliza visited the local community center, her third attempt that week. She explained the situation, showed the reports, spoke about Noah. The woman at the desk shook her head with the automated sympathy of someone used to saying no. All our funding is frozen. The government suspended this quarter's transfers. The only option would be an emergency sponsorship. And how do I get that? We recommend starting a crowdfunding campaign. People tend to share stories that move them. It's worth trying. Eliza took a deep breath. I don't want pity donations. I just want to save my son. The woman tried to smile, but her eyes said she'd heard variations of that line too many times, and they rarely ended well. That night, Ryan decided to go to the hospital. Not to see her, just to watch. To see how the boy was doing. To know, just to know. Wearing a dark cap and an ordinary coat, he walked through the main corridor and blended in with the families in the waiting room. It didn't take long to spot her. Eliza was sitting in a corner, Noah asleep in her lap. Both looked exhausted. She stroked her son's hair with slender fingers, like that touch was the only certainty she had left. Ryan took a step forward, then stopped. He didn't know what to say, didn't know what to offer, didn't know if he'd be welcome. He just stood there, watching, until she stood to speak with a nurse. She carefully moved Noah from her lap, adjusted her backpack, and headed down the hall. Before she disappeared, she looked back and saw him. The glance lasted a second, but it was enough for her to understand that he knew, and for him to realize there was no pretending anymore. He cared. What he would say or not say from that moment on would decide the fate of a life. Ryan stood frozen in the hallway, feeling the weight of that single second when Eliza's eyes met his. There was no surprise in her face, no anger. It was as if she'd known from the start that he would end up there, not out of kindness, but because he couldn't stay away. She kept walking, as if that look required no response, as if there was no time for empty explanations. Ryan didn't follow. Not yet. He returned to the lobby, sat on the last bench in the waiting room, and looked around with new eyes. It was a children's hospital, but there was no color on the walls. The murals were faded, the hard plastic chairs uncomfortable even for adults. Kids coughed, slept curled on the laps of mothers, whose faces carried dark circles where rest used to be. He didn't belong there, but he couldn't leave. Eliza returned home with Noah shortly after 10. The hospital had discharged him after monitoring, but he was far from stable. In her backpack, she carried an emergency report and a new prescription she couldn't afford. Climbing the stairs to the laundry building, she noticed Noah's body felt lighter, and that scared her. He was losing weight, becoming fragile. Inside the room, the wall fan turned slowly, as if it too were tired. She laid her son on the mattress, adjusted the pillows and sat beside him, eyes fixed on the ceiling. The feeling of helplessness was absolute, like an invisible wall she pushed against every day, and never moved. Noah fell asleep within minutes, exhausted, feverish, more fragile than ever, and Eliza felt something inside her beginning to crack. Ryan got home just before midnight. He didn't turn on the lights, dropped his keys on the counter, and poured a glass of water he didn't drink. Ran his hands through his hair, then over his face like trying to wake up from a fog. There was something about that woman that pulled him off balance, and it wasn't just the fact that she didn't smile at him, it was that she didn't need him. Even in despair, Eliza didn't beg, didn't make promises, didn't try to impress, and somehow that unsettled him more than anything else. He thought about calling, then about sending a deposit, but any gesture now would feel like guilt or control, and he'd already seen in her eyes she wouldn't accept either. The next morning, Eliza woke to the sound of Noah coughing. It was different, dry, short, with long pauses in between. His chest made a low sound, like it was sinking. She got up carefully, opened the curtains to air out the room and tried to dab a warm cloth on his face. "It's okay, Mommy," he murmured, voice raspy. "It will be. I promise." But she knew promises meant nothing without action. She changed his clothes, made tea, gave him the last pill in the box and left with him in her arms. Same bus, same route, same silence. On the way, she stopped at a pharmacy to ask about the meds. The clerk didn't hesitate. "148, cash only." She thanked him, saying nothing more. 148 was more than her entire week's income. Ryan, meanwhile, stood inside a glass-walled office on the 42nd floor of the Whitmore Medical Group, where a meeting with the philanthropy division was about to begin. The presentation slides were full of numbers, research investments, international NGO donations, visibility programs. But he was thinking of only one person, and one real problem: Noah. While the director went on about statistics, Ryan typed a message on his phone. How long to schedule a lung surgery for a critically ill 3-year-old? He got a reply in under 5 minutes. Outside the public system and with private funding, up to 4 days. You can use the Whitmore Institute mobile unit. He stared at the screen for a long moment, then replied, "Reserve it, but don't enter the child's name in the system yet." Eliza sat in the waiting room of the pediatric clinic where she'd been hoping for an opening for over 2 weeks. She was fasting. Noah slept in her lap, short of breath. In her purse there were $47 and a transit voucher. She looked at her phone screen. No messages, no calls. For a second she thought about writing to Ryan, not to ask, just to understand. Why had he come to the hospital? Why show up and disappear like it was all a rehearsal? But she didn't. She never had time for games, or the mental space for speculation. She was made of urgency, and urgency didn't pair with doubt. By the end of the day, the receptionist approached her. "Ms. Brooks, I'm sorry, but the on-call doctor won't be able to see you today. We had a serious accident come in, and all beds have been prioritized." Eliza nodded. She didn't get frustrated anymore. Frustration took energy, and she had none left. She picked up Noah and left in silence. As they passed down the sidewalk, a cold breeze lifted her hair, and Noah coughed hard against her shoulder. It was nearly dark, and the city didn't even notice. Across town in a penthouse, Ryan stared at his laptop screen. Noah's medical file showed no family history, no father listed, no legal support. He clicked on the anonymous donor tab. A name popped up in the corner, a name he knew, his own. Ryan shoved the laptop back as if it had burned him. For a moment the world stopped. His head spun. The college years, the donation for quick cash, the confidentiality contract, the emotional detachment. And now, the truth in front of him. He wasn't just a man who had offered $1 million for one night to a stranger. He was, by chance or by cruel irony, the biological father of the boy she was trying to save. And that changed everything. The sun had already set when Eliza stepped off the bus, Noah asleep in her arms. Night fell with the slow stillness of a dry summer, but urgency moved through her like an underground river. She hadn't been able to get a slot at the hospital, nor an answer from the clinic. Noah's cough had worsened, his body growing lighter by the day, as if he were slowly fading in silence. Eliza didn't cry. Not yet. She knew that if she started, she wouldn't know how to stop. As she turned onto the street where the laundry was, she saw something unexpected. A black car parked in front of the gate. A man leaned against the side, light-colored coat, head lowered, hands in his pockets, as if time had frozen for him. Ryan. She stopped, not out of fear, but exhaustion. She had no energy left for people who didn't know what they wanted. He saw her, straightened his posture, didn't smile. "I needed to see you," he said as she approached. "See who?" "You and Noah." She nodded once, her voice dry. "He's sleeping. He has a fever." Ryan looked down at the boy in her arms, too small, too fragile, but still clinging to a thread of strength in his mother's hands. "Can I come up?" She didn't answer, just walked through the gate, crossed the narrow corridor, climbed the stairs, and entered the small, stuffy room. She left the door slightly ajar, a gesture that, in her language, meant, "Come in if you want, but don't ask questions." Ryan stepped inside quietly. He looked around, a bed, a small table, a noisy fan, a backpack in the corner, and a little cloth doll hanging in the window like a decoration. Eliza laid Noah down carefully, adjusted his pillow, and covered him with a thin blanket. Only then did she turn to Ryan. "What do you want?" The question came out straight. No sarcasm, no invitation. He hesitated. "The truth. I'm not entirely sure." "Then start with what you think you know." Ryan looked at the backpack, at the empty medicine bottles on the table, at the curtainless window, then back at her. "I know you don't want my pity or my help." "Correct. But I also know your son is getting worse, and you're out of options." She crossed her arms. "So what exactly did you come here to do? Buy another night?" The blow hit hard, but he didn't flinch. "No, I came because after what you said to me, and after I saw you in that hospital, I couldn't sleep." Eliza stared at him for a few seconds, then let out a short laugh. There was no humor in it, just fatigue. "Welcome to the real world." Ryan walked over slowly, sat in the chair beside the bed. "He has your eyes," he said, almost in a whisper, "and my urgency. Not much of a gift." Silence settled between them, thick, heavy with the weight of unspoken things. Ryan looked at Noah, who slept fitfully. "I can pay for the surgery," he said, not meeting her eyes. "No conditions, no contract, just because I can." She remained standing, untouched. "Why?" "Because it's the right thing to do." "No. No one does that just because it's right. Not even you." Now he looked at her, really looked. "Maybe I'm trying to fix the kind of man I've become." She looked away. "Money doesn't fix character, Ryan." "I know. And it doesn't buy forgiveness. I know that too." She walked to the window, rested her hands on the sill. "I accepted what you offered that night because I was desperate, because I thought I could get through one night of erasing myself if it meant giving my son a breath. And you didn't erase yourself." "Of course I did. The difference is you thought you'd bought something when really, you were just standing in front of a woman too exhausted to fight at that moment." Ryan remained silent. She turned back to him. "But now, if you want to help, do it in a way that doesn't make me smaller. No contracts, no visits, no you need to rest, let me handle it. Just transfer the money and disappear." Those words hurt more than he cared to admit, but there was too much truth in them to deny. He nodded. "It'll be in your account tomorrow before noon." She didn't thank him, just gave a small nod. Before he could leave, Noah stirred. He opened his eyes slowly, looked at Ryan with the blank expression of fever and exhaustion. "Are you the man from the hotel?" Ryan turned slowly, his chest tightened. "That's me, champ." Noah smiled, small, almost invisible. "Mommy said you brought water." Eliza closed her eyes for a second, then sat beside her son. "Yeah, baby, he brought water." Noah reached out his small hand to Ryan. "Can you tell a story?" Ryan paused, like time itself had frozen for a moment. He sat back down. "Of course." And he began to tell one. Awkwardly, no funny voices, just presence. Eliza said nothing, just watched. It wasn't love, Not yet. But for the first time, Noah fell asleep without coughing, and Ryan didn't want to leave. What he didn't know yet was that the blood in that boy's veins also ran through his own. Noah slept, his breathing still labored, punctuated by dry little pops in his chest. Eliza covered him gently and turned off the light, leaving only the nightstand lamp glowing in the corner. Ryan was still there, sitting near the door. He didn't speak, didn't move, just watched. Eliza walked over slowly, picked up a bottle of warm water and a clean cloth, wiped her son's face with automatic movements. Rituals learned out of necessity, repeated like a silent prayer. "Thank you," she said at last. Ryan looked up. "For what?" "For the story, and for not asking anything else." He nodded. The silence between them wasn't comfortable, but it wasn't hostile either. It was suspended, as if both knew something bigger was coming, but neither was ready to name it. "I asked for the money to be transferred through my foundation. That way you're not directly linked to me." She looked at him for a moment, then back at her son. "You always find a way to fix things. While keeping your distance? It works, usually." "I'm not usually." He didn't respond. He knew anything he said wouldn't be enough. The next day, Eliza received the confirmation. The cost of the surgery had been paid in full, with extra for post-op exams and hospitalization. The name on the bank notification was generic, Whitmore Foundation. She exhaled. Part of her wanted to return it. The other part, the one that carried Noah in her arms through every fever, knew this fight was no longer hers alone, and that winning would require letting go of pride. She walked into her son's room and sat beside the bed. Noah was sleeping deeply. The meds had begun to work, and his oxygen levels had slightly improved. For the first time in weeks, Eliza cried. Alone, silently, not out of weakness, but relief, and the fear of getting used to it. Ryan spent the day trapped in meetings that felt like they belonged to a version of his life that no longer included him fully. Contracts, shareholders, numbers, everything still ran like clockwork. But inside something had shifted, a growing disconnect between what he said and what he felt. Mid-afternoon, he accessed the donor registry again. The system required special clearance for full genetic records. He hesitated for several minutes, then entered his password. The genetic file for donor 39A2B appeared on screen. Height, blood type, family history, everything matched. It was him. He was the one who had donated 10 years ago at a university clinic in California during a medical exchange. He'd been broke at the time, and the compensation was decent. He didn't think much about it, didn't read the fine print, just signed. Now the world spun slowly inside his head, because everything pointed to the same inescapable truth. Noah was his biological son. That evening, Ryan returned to the hospital. He wanted to speak with the doctor in charge of the surgery. He masked his anxiety with professionalism, but his tone betrayed a rising unease. "The boy, Noah Brooks. I'd like to review the medical protocol. Make sure he has absolute priority." The doctor nodded, pulling up the file. "Yes, Mr. Whitmore, everything's scheduled. We received the payment through the foundation, just one detail left." "What detail?" "The boy's blood type is rare. We need compatible donors for post-op support." Ryan felt his stomach tighten. "What's his type?" "AB negative. Very rare." Ryan said nothing. He knew. He knew because he had the same type. The doctor continued, unaware of the weight behind the silence. "We'll test the parents, of course. Ms. Brooks already did. We're missing the father, but she said there's no way to contact him, no name, no history. What if I offered to donate?" The doctor looked up, surprised. "Are you family?" Ryan hesitated, then shook his head. "I just want to help." The doctor nodded, suspicious, but didn't press. "We can do the collection tomorrow morning." Ryan thanked him, left the room, and only then leaned against the cold wall of the hallway. It wasn't just a desire to help. It was something deeper he couldn't name. He wanted to protect, but he also wanted to belong. Across the city, Eliza packed the hospital bag. She gathered the medicine bottles, the tiny clothes, the documents, all with surgical calm. all in silence, until Noah opened his eyes. "Mom, I'm here, baby. Is the man coming back?" She paused. "Which man?" "The one who tells cool stories. I like him." She sat by the bed. "He might come back if you want." "I want him to." Eliza smiled, tired. "Then we'll wait, okay?" Noah nodded, then drifted back to sleep. She stayed there, holding his hand. And for the first time, she wanted Ryan to come back too. The white room of the private clinic was silent. Ryan watched the small tube of blood being sealed and labeled, while the technician entered the data into the system. "The results will be ready in 24 hours, the attendant said without looking up. Ryan nodded, but his mind was elsewhere. There were no more doubts. Everything he needed to know was already inside him, screaming like an unwanted truth. Noah was his son, not theoretically, not metaphorically, but biologically, mathematically. A remnant of a reckless past, a life he had helped create without knowing it. Now fate was collecting, and the price wasn't money, it was responsibility. Eliza, meanwhile, was spending the last hours in a state of emotional suspension. Since the surgery had been scheduled, everything around her seemed to operate on autopilot. She fed Noah, checked the medication times, sorted the documents, slept standing, woke before sunrise. Her body followed the routine, but inside, something had locked up, a kind of defense only built by those who've watched everything collapse before. She didn't know Ryan was about to disappear for a few days, or that it would affect her more than she was willing to admit. At the hospital, the head doctor asked to speak with Ryan privately late that afternoon. "We did the testing, and the result was unexpected," the doctor said carefully. Ryan stayed silent. "You're a 100% match with the boy, and that's only possible with a very close genetic link. Father and son, essentially." "I know," Ryan replied before the doctor could finish. The doctor blinked, surprised. "You already knew?" "Just recently. Still trying to understand what that changes." "That changes everything, Mr. Whitmore. Not just emotionally, but legally. Ms. Brooks didn't list a father on the child's record. That puts you in a delicate position, or a powerful one." Ryan felt the weight behind the words. The system still saw human relationships in terms of hierarchy. Leverage. "I won't use that against her." "And what if she uses it against you?" Ryan stood. "Eliza doesn't want anything from me, just enough to save her son, who, as it turns out, is mine too." "Are you going to tell her?" "Not yet." At that same moment, Eliza watched Noah sleeping at home for the last time before the surgery. The room was tidy, the hospital bag packed, the documents laminated, the outfit for the next day set aside. Everything meticulously organized, as if the order of things could protect them from chaos. She felt strangely alone. Ryan hadn't shown up in 2 days, no messages, no sign, and his silence was starting to bother her more than she was ready to admit. That night, Noah woke up crying. Chest pain made it hard for him to breathe. She picked him up, called the hospital, and was told to bring him in immediately. Hours later, sitting in a surgical wing recliner, Eliza waited while Noah was given IV medication and oxygen. The doctors said he was stable, but the surgery had to be moved up by 24 hours. She nodded. No more questions. She just wanted to see him well. Then the doctor pulled her aside. "Ms. Brooks, we need a compatible donor for the post-op recovery. We've found a man who volunteered. Full compatibility." She frowned. "Who?" "Ryan Whitmore." The question came before the thought. "How is he compatible?" The doctor hesitated. "That kind of match usually only happens between a parent and child." The ground vanished beneath her. Eliza felt her heart hit her stomach. "That's impossible." "Would you be willing to speak with him?" She stayed silent, then shook her head slowly. "Send him away, and tell him I don't want to see him until after the surgery. Ms., please, not now." Ryan was in the hallway when the medical team gave him the message. She didn't want to see him, not now, and he understood. It wasn't anger, it was protection. Eliza had always built walls, not out of pride, but fear of collapsing again. and now he had dug beneath her foundations without permission. He returned to the car without a word, but something inside him had already been decided. The next morning, he'd be there, even if only to watch from afar, because now he wasn't just the man who'd done damage. He was the father of a boy who might never call him that, but who shared his blood, and was about to face the most important surgery of his life. The sound of the heart monitor filled the recovery room with soft, steady beeps. Noah slept, tubes connected to his nose and a wide bandage over his chest. The surgery had ended just a few hours earlier. The doctors called it a success, but Eliza knew that until she heard her son laugh again, she wouldn't be able to breathe freely. She sat beside the bed, head resting against the mattress. She didn't have the strength to say thank you. She just held her son's tiny hand and silently repeated what she had been saying for days. Please, just one more day, just one more chance. The doctor entered and spoke softly. He's responding well. The transfusion was stable. The next 48 hours are critical. She nodded. Thank you. The donor gave blood last night. Didn't want contact, just asked not to be mentioned. Eliza looked away. Gratitude felt bitter. Ryan didn't go home. He slept in his car in the hospital parking lot, the seat reclined, his head spinning with images he couldn't quiet. Noah, the surgery, the medical file, the match. And Eliza. Always Eliza. The next morning, he entered the hospital wearing a dark cap and asked to speak with the head nurse. I just want to know how he's doing. Stable, but no discharge from the ICU yet. And her? She's been with him the whole time, hasn't even left to eat. Ryan nodded. Can you give her this? It was a simple envelope with one handwritten line on a small note. If you want me to disappear after this, I will. But no, it was never just about money. The nurse took the envelope but hesitated. I don't know if this is the right moment. Then keep it and give it to her when it is. Eliza received the note hours later. She read it without emotion, then read it again. The message was simple, but the last sentence lingered in her mind. It was never just about money. She hated herself for what she felt next, the urge to believe it, the urge to forgive him for keeping the truth for so long. But at the same time, she couldn't ignore the feeling of betrayal. How could someone hide something so important? How could he walk around with her son's blood in his veins and say nothing? Worse, how could he offer money for a night without knowing he was buying the right to look into his own son's eyes? The knot was too emotional to unravel in an afternoon. She folded the note. Carefully, didn't tear it, didn't throw it away. It was still too early for any decision. Noah woke up the next day in less pain. The fever was gone. His breathing still labored, but he smiled when he saw Eliza. Are we going home? Not yet, sweetheart, but soon. He squeezed her hand tightly. You're the best mom in the world. Eliza didn't know what to say. She just brushed his hair and took a deep breath. Maybe she had already won the biggest battle, but another war was happening inside her. Outside, Ryan stood by the mirrored windows of the pediatric wing. He had been there for over an hour. He knew he had no right to walk in, knew that everything now depended on her. Eliza held the power to rewrite the ending, to allow, or not, his place in something that had started by chance. And Ryan, used to controlling everything, now depended on the forgiveness of someone who had never asked him for anything, but who now held everything he wanted. Noah didn't know, but instinctively, he felt it. Because that night, before falling asleep, he said something Eliza would never forget. Mommy, did the story man come back? He did. He feels like a dad, even if he doesn't say it. Eliza didn't answer. But the answer burned inside her, because even if he didn't know, Noah was right. As she left the hospital, Eliza sat on the bench in the reception area and stayed there for nearly 20 minutes, doing nothing, just looking at the revolving entrance door, as if she were waiting for something or someone. The note was still in her pocket, and with it, the doubt that was slowly starting to feel like hope. Ryan returned to the hospital for the third time that week, but he didn't go inside. He watched from a distance, parked across the street, his face hidden behind the tinted glass, Something in him had changed, and it wasn't just guilt, it was loss, the fear of never being able to make it right. Noah had already been transferred from the ICU to a private room. Eliza slept in the armchair beside his bed, her face resting on her own arm. Even in sleep, she looked alert, like someone who had learned not to let her guard down, even when the body gave out. Ryan sent a message. Just one. If you'll let me, I'd like to meet him. Not as a millionaire, not as the idiot who made that offer, but as a father. There was no reply. But 2 hours later, when Noah was awake and watching cartoons, the nurse came in with a visitor. Ryan, no suit, no arrogance. You came back, Noah said, without knowing why that presence felt so familiar. Ryan smiled. I promised I'd bring that toy you liked, remember? Noah smiled shyly and stretched out his little arms to take the toy. Eliza, sitting quietly in the corner of the room, watched it all without saying a word. She hadn't said yes, but she hadn't stopped it either, because something inside her, no matter how hurt, knew that her son deserved to see the face behind that compatible blood, even if the decision hurt. He was happy, the nurse said later that day. Eliza nodded, eyes still on the window. I haven't seen Noah this excited since he arrived. He asked if the guy from the sofa night is coming back tomorrow. Eliza bit her lip, holding in emotions like holding back an avalanche. I don't know, she whispered. The next morning, Ryan came back, this time with books, coloring pages, and a different kind of silence. It wasn't the silence of someone who felt above it all. It was the silence of someone who no longer knew where he stood. Noah lit up again, started telling stories, asked Ryan to help with a puzzle. And when Eliza tried to stand up and give them space, Ryan stopped her with a soft voice. Stay. It's with you that he feels safe. She stayed. But she didn't look at him. Outside the room, the whispers had started. Nurses murmured. Doctors exchanged looks. Who was this man who came every day, brought gifts, but never identified himself as family? Eliza knew she couldn't hide it much longer, but she also knew she wasn't ready to explain. Not to them, not to herself. Mommy, Noah said that afternoon, is Ryan my dad? The question hit like a lightning bolt to the heart. Eliza froze, looked at him. The boy was staring at the ceiling, as if thinking out loud. Why do you think that? Because he looks at me like the dads in cartoons, and he has Grandpa's hair. Eliza took a deep breath. Her whole body felt heavy. We'll talk about that later, okay? Noah nodded, but before closing his eyes, he whispered, I like when he comes. It feels like we're stronger. Eliza left the room a few minutes later. She found Ryan waiting in the hallway. You heard? I did. And I didn't come for a title or redemption. I came because for the first time, I want to be part of something that isn't about me. She didn't say a word, just looked at him. Her eyes said everything. Don't hurt my son. Because I can take it, but he can't. Ryan understood. Just let me try. She turned away. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. He likes building things in the morning, and she walked off without looking back. But her footsteps sounded like someone still learning to trust. Noah was asleep, and the TV cast a soft blue glow across the room. Eliza carefully adjusted the sheets. A bottle of water and the medicine sat by the bedside, everything in its place, as if keeping the routine tight was the only way to stay steady. You're exhausted, Ryan said softly from the doorway. Have you thought about going home to sleep for a night? I'll stay. She looked at him with a mix of suspicion and gratitude. If I go home, my body might rest, but my mind, it doesn't know how to shut off. Ryan nodded. He knew any small concession took days to earn, and only seconds to lose. He asked again, she said, not looking at him. If you're his dad. And what did you say? That he needed to get better first, then we'd talk about it. The silence between them was dense, but not hostile. It was the kind of silence heavy with things too big for words. The next morning, Ryan showed up with a painting kit, Noah grinned when he saw the colorful brushes and the makeshift easel Ryan carried in his arms. "Want to paint a picture just for us?" Ryan asked. "One with 3 people?" "That's right." Noah nodded enthusiastically, and Eliza, watching from the chair, felt a tightness in her chest. It was beautiful, but also dangerous, because it felt permanent. That's when Rachel walked in, white coat, hair tied up, clipboard in hand. "He's stable," she said, looking at Eliza, "but still needs close monitoring." Eliza nodded. She'd heard that before, but this time the doctor didn't walk away. She turned to Ryan. "I didn't expect to see you here so often." "Neither did I," he said calmly. "So it's true? You're involved with her?" The question wasn't sharp in tone. It was soft, but cutting. Eliza turned, surprised. The tension thickened. "That's none of your business, Rachel," Ryan said. "After everything we went through, of course it is. Or did you forget?" Eliza didn't understand at first, but she saw the discomfort in Ryan's eyes. Rachel continued, "You never answered when I left. You disappeared. And now you show up here, building little family drawings with a woman you barely know." Eliza stood up. "Maybe you should go, Doctor." Rachel looked at her with disdain. "I'm just trying to protect the ones who need it. Sometimes these connections come more from guilt than love." Her words shattered the moment like glass. Noah watched in silence. Ryan stepped forward. "Rachel, don't confuse the past with what I'm trying to do now. You had the chance to be with me. You chose not to stay." Rachel bit her lip, furious, then walked out without another word. But the damage was done. Eliza stood still for a moment. "She was a part of the past. Nothing important," Ryan said. Too quickly. She seemed important enough to still carry resentment. He didn't respond, and that hurt more than any explanation. That night, Eliza sat on the hospital balcony, where visitors usually went to smoke or get air. Ryan approached quietly, but this time she didn't look at him. "You said you wanted to be part of Noah's life, but you still haven't found the courage to tell him who you are." "Because I don't want him to think I'm trying to replace someone." "No, you don't want him to see you the way you saw your own father." Ryan froze. "You've been running a long time, Ryan, from your family, from your mistakes, from yourself." He lowered his head. "And now? Now you have 2 choices. Come into his life with the truth and or walk away for good. But I won't let my son get attached to someone who doesn't know what he wants." Ryan closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, something in him looked resolved. "I'll tell him." "Then do it tomorrow," because he asked again before he fell asleep. She got up and walked back inside, leaving Ryan alone with the one thing he had always feared most, the mirror of responsibility. Inside the room, Noah slept peacefully, but in the hallway, a shadow moved quietly. Rachel, holding Noah's medical file in her hands, and her eyes were no longer just hurt. They were dangerous. Morning light poured into the hospital room, like a reminder that time waited for no one. Noah woke up before Eliza. He sat up slowly, grabbed the teddy bear Ryan had given him, and began swinging his feet at the edge of the bed. Ryan was already there, sitting in silence, as if he had been waiting for that exact moment. "Good morning, champ," he said quietly. Noah smiled, but he didn't run to hug him. He just sat there watching. "Did you bring more drawings?" "Not today. Today I brought something else, a conversation." Noah furrowed his brow, like he knew something serious was coming. "Is everything okay?" Ryan moved closer, sat beside him on the bed, keeping his eyes on the toy. "I wanted to tell you something, but only if you want to hear it." "I do." Ryan took a deep breath. Eliza, already awake, sat quietly in the armchair, not moving. "Remember when we talked about family, and you asked if I was your dad?" Noah nodded, eyes wide. "The answer is, yes, I am." Silence, no shock, no tears. Just the kind of silence only a child can offer. Pure, receptive, brutally honest. "Why didn't you tell me before?" "Because I was scared. Scared I wouldn't be what you need, scared you wouldn't want to know me." Noah rested his head on Ryan's shoulder. "But I liked you. even without knowing. The words shattered everything inside Ryan. That small boy, fragile and strong all at once, had just given him more forgiveness than he believed he deserved. Eliza didn't cry, but she had to look away for a moment. Later, while Noah slept again, Eliza called Ryan into the hallway. "Thank you for telling him. He deserved to know, and I needed to say it. You were honest with him, but with me there's still a part missing." Ryan understood and didn't dodge it. "The donation was made when I was in college. It was just a way to pay off debt. I never knew who would receive it. I spent everything I had trying to get pregnant, and when I saw the result, I didn't regret it. I just wonder what it means now. It means we met the wrong way, but maybe that was the only way." Eliza nodded, but before she could say anything else, her phone buzzed. A notification from a digital newspaper. The headline made her blood run cold. "CEO involved in paternity scandal with former casino waitress." She clicked. Photos came up immediately. Old images of her in a janitor's uniform, leaving the hotel with Ryan beside her. An entire article dragging her past, painting her as the schemer, the gold digger. Eliza felt her stomach turn. The world spun. "Rachel!" Ryan closed his eyes. Rage, guilt, shame. "She's trying to hurt me, and using you to do it." Eliza gripped the phone so tightly her fingers turned white. "This is going to ruin everything. Noah's school, his tests, the hospital support I fought for. Now they'll say I did it all for money. I'll fix it." "No, you'll leave," she said, voice firm. "You brought this into my life. Now take it with you." Ryan tried to explain, but she had already gone back inside, locked the door. Hours later, Eliza Miller's name was one of the most searched online. They called her the Scandal Mum, the woman who extorted a CEO, the $1 million con. The truth? No one cared. Noah watched cartoons, unaware of the shift in energy, of why his mother trembled when the phone rang, of why nurses suddenly treated them like a tabloid headline. Outside, reporters gathered on the hospital sidewalk. Across town, Rachel smiled at her computer screen. She finally felt victorious. But what she didn't know was that Ryan still had a card to play. From the top floor of his apartment, Ryan stared at his reflection in the glass. He had promised himself he would never become his father, that he would be better. But now, he was exactly where he'd always feared, on the outside of the lives that mattered most. Alone, but no longer at peace. The next morning, Eliza was called into hospital administration. The director looked at her with a mix of discomfort and coldness. "You understand the position of the institution, correct? I did nothing wrong, but the environment has become compromised. This is temporary, just until things settle." Eliza left the office without arguing. She knew that no matter how dignified she remained, she'd never be stronger than the headline. And at that moment, she was alone, or so she thought. Because when she stepped outside, a black car was waiting at the curb, and inside it was someone she never expected to see so soon. Matthew Carter, Ryan's brother. "Can we talk?" he asked, voice low and serious. And that was when the game started to change. Matthew Carter didn't usually get involved in family matters, but when the scandal broke and Noah's medical records reached his desk, he realized something bigger was at stake than reputations or companies. There was a child with damaged lungs and an urgent surgery, and a mother being crucified without proof. Matthew looked at Eliza in the passenger seat. She was silent, hands folded in her lap like someone bracing for another unjust sentence. "I know my brother," he said, eyes on the road. "I know how much he screws up, but I also know how hard he tries to fix it. That doesn't change what's happening now. No, but it changes what can happen from here." She turned to him, skeptical. "Why are you helping me?" Matthew pulled up in front of the hospital board building. "Because Noah is a patient in my program, and when an institution abandons a child because of his mother's name, it's the institution that's wrong, not you." Eliza's eyes burned. She didn't cry, but she breathed deeper than she had in days. Elsewhere in the city, Rachel walked into her office with her phone in hand. The article she had planted was now spreading across international news outlets. In her mind, Ryan would come crawling back, shamed, broken. But she didn't know the man he was trying to become. The press conference was called at the last minute. Cameras, microphones, flashbulbs. The CEO of Whitmore Holdings, live before the nation. Ryan straightened his jacket, took a deep breath, and stepped up to the podium. No PR team, no prepared statement, just the truth. In recent days, my name has been tied to a scandal involving a woman, a child, and a large sum of money. I'd like to clarify a few things. The flashes intensified. 3 years ago, this woman underwent an artificial insemination procedure using an anonymous donor. That donor was me. Gasps, murmurs, headlines typed in real time. I never knew the result. But a few weeks ago, fate brought this child into my life. A child who shares my blood, but who's been raised by someone far stronger than I ever was. He paused. What began as a mistake became a responsibility. Then affection. Today, I claim what genetics gave me and what my heart confirmed. This boy is my son, and his mother, Eliza Miller, never came to me, never asked for anything. I was the one who intruded in her life, and I'm still learning how to earn the place I want to hold. Another pause, eyes brimming, but steady. And if this costs me my public image, so be it, because no contract, no company is worth more than the chance to be part of my son's life. Total silence. He left the podium without taking questions, but he had already said everything. Rachel watched from her office, her face hardened. On the outside composed, on the inside shattered. She tried calling Ryan. The number was out of service. Tried calling the hospital. It was too late. Her name began trending. Not as the woman scorned, but as the doctor who broke medical confidentiality and exposed a sick child. Justice was coming. Through the front door. At the hospital, Matthew handed the board Noah's medical records along with a letter signed by him as responsible for the treatment protocol. Ms. Miller's removal was an ethical and moral failure. The hospital owes her a public apology. With media pressure mounting and the most respected Carter standing in the room, the director signed the retraction. Eliza was reinstated. No fanfare, no spotlights, but this time, as someone who had won. Noah ran down the hallway, a colorful mask over his face, favorite toy in hand. When he saw Eliza return, he shouted, "Mommy, the elevator has my name now." She scooped him up, spinning gently. "I told you we'd be okay," he grinned. "What about Ryan?" She looked toward the door, and for a moment the world paused. Ryan was there, not in a suit, not as a CEO, but holding a new toy and a letter in his pocket. That night, Eliza found the letter on the bedside table, handwritten on plain paper. "You said you were tired of explaining yourself to people who never listen. I don't want to be one of them. So today I came in silence, just to say with my presence, I didn't leave and I won't. When you're ready, I'll be here. Ryan." Eliza closed her eyes, rested her forehead against the window, and for the first time in weeks, let a tear fall. Just one. But it carried the weight of everything she had fought through in silence. And maybe now, she wasn't alone anymore. The silence in the penthouse apartment was suffocating. Ryan stood at the window, but all he saw was his own reflection, and what he saw unsettled him deeply. His shoulders, once held high with arrogance, now slumped under the weight of a truth he never imagined carrying. The revelation about the boy, about Noah, still echoed inside him like a persistent whisper. He was the father, not by choice, not by love, but through an act he barely remembered. A donation made in his youth with no name, no face, and no expectation of consequence. And now the consequence had a name, had eyes, and needed him. Ryan stepped away from the window, as if breaking a spell. He opened the desk drawer, pulled out the envelope with the test results, and ripped it apart without hesitation. This was no longer about paper. It was about conscience, about love, and about urgency. He grabbed his phone and dialed his brother. "Matthew, it's Ryan." "I know. Is everything okay?" Matthew's voice was cautious. "He's my son." Silence came before any words. "I figured after the tests," Matthew finally said, "but you needed to come to it on your own." Ryan closed his eyes and took a deep breath. "I need to find them now." Eliza left the hospital with Noah this afternoon. They were headed home, but she might need space. She was hurt, Ryan. "I'm not letting it end like this." The car stopped in front of a small house in the suburbs. It was simple, with a fallen bicycle in the yard and thin curtains swaying in the afternoon breeze. Ryan got out without thinking. He knocked once, twice. Nothing. He called her name. "Eliza?" Silence. Then a soft voice came from behind him. "She's not here, mister." It was Noah. The boy sat on the porch steps, wearing a superhero shirt and a blanket over his legs. His breathing still seemed short, but his eyes were stronger than ever. Ryan knelt beside him. The air left his lungs. That small child was part of him. The future he never knew he wanted, and now couldn't lose. "Do you remember me?" Ryan asked softly. Noah nodded. "You're the guy from the hotel, the one who gave me that ugly toy." Ryan laughed for the first time in days, a small laugh, one that hurt. "Is your mom mad at me?" Noah thought for a moment. "I think she's sad. When Mommy's sad, she doesn't talk. She writes." Ryan frowned. "She writes?" The boy pulled a folded sheet of paper from his coat pocket. "She gave me this and said, 'If the man comes back, give this to him.'" Ryan took the paper with trembling hands. He wanted to ask more. He wanted to hold on to the moment, but he opened the letter. "Ryan, I won't give speeches, or make demands, or cause a scene. You offered me money, then silence, then a roof. And I accepted all of it for one reason you never understood. My son, I didn't expect love or recognition. I just wanted to save Noah. And for that, I went as far as I could. I swallowed my pride, swallowed my anger. But I can't anymore. Finding out he was your son, that the life growing inside me was half mine, half yours, was like taking a punch to the chest. Not because it changes everything, but because it changes what you should have felt. It was never just about you. It was about him. And still, you only saw me as a one-night woman, not as the mother of your child. So now I'm leaving, I don't know for how long, maybe a week, maybe a month, maybe forever. But if one day you truly want to be a father, you'll find me. And it won't be with promises or money. It'll be with presence." Eliza Ryan read the last lines in silence, unblinking. The paper shook in his hands. The world around him moved in slow motion. He didn't notice when Noah rested his head on his shoulder, or when the sky began to darken, but he felt it like he'd never felt anything before. Minutes later, Ryan was back in the car. "Where to, sir?" the driver asked. Ryan looked at his own reflection in the window. He wasn't a father yet. He wasn't ready. But he was going to try. "To where she was born. I want to know everything about her past, where she lived, who she knew. Everything." The driver nodded. Ryan closed his eyes for a moment. Night was falling over the city, but for the first time he felt a sense of direction. And in the back seat, still gripping the letter tightly, he made a promise to himself. "If I find her, I won't let her go again." He followed her trail like chasing a train already in motion. The letter Eliza left had no address, no destination, but he knew where to start. Not with money, not with lawyers, but with awareness, watching the places she might have passed and listening to who she was before he entered her life. He visited the old shelter where she used to stay on cold nights. He spoke with a staff member, an older woman with tired eyes who remembered Eliza and her little boy with shallow breath. "She was proud," the woman said. "Never asked for much, but we saw it. She fought like a lioness for that boy." Ryan thanked her and left. He walked alleyways, crossed paths with people who only knew Eliza through passing glances. Everywhere he went, he heard the same thing. She never complained. But it hurt her. Until someone mentioned a small town in the countryside where Eliza might have distant relatives, a quiet place hidden among hills and silence. Ryan left without hesitation. The road was long, but he knew it was no longer about finding her. It was about proving he had changed. The bus arrived in the late afternoon. The houses were simple, weathered wood, and the trees swayed in the gentle rural breeze. Ryan wasn't used to such quiet, but here, far from everything, he felt closer to her than ever. He stopped at the town's small grocery store, asked for Eliza. No one knew last names, but when he described a woman with a small child, weak lungs, and a strong gaze, the shopkeeper pointed to the top of the hill. "There's an old house up there. She showed up last week, alone, but with hope in her eyes." Ryan walked the dirt path as if carrying the weight of his entire life. When he arrived, he didn't knock right away. He paused, watched. Eliza was on the porch, sitting with Noah in her arms. The boy was asleep. The sun was slipping behind the trees, painting everything in a soft golden hue. She didn't see him at first, but when she did, she didn't get up, didn't run. She just looked at him with an expression that said, "You took too long." Ryan walked to the gate. He didn't speak, didn't apologize. He just stood there, like someone who knew he no longer had the right to walk in. It was Eliza who broke the silence. "How did you know I was here? I looked for where your dignity would live, and this place has your name written all over it." She nodded faintly. "Here to make another offer." "No, I'm here to ask for a chance to be what I should have been from the beginning." She adjusted Noah in her arms. He stirred but didn't wake. "You came as a client, then tried to be a hero. Now you want to be a father. Now I just want to be present." The silence between them was different this time. It wasn't accusatory. It was space to heal, to build something no contract or fortune could buy. Ryan took a deep breath. "I don't have all the answers. I don't have the clean story you deserve. But I've learned that sometimes love begins when we lose control, and I got lost in you." Eliza didn't smile, but her eyes shimmered. She stood slowly, still holding Noah, walked to the gate, stood face to face with Ryan. "I don't need promises. I need consistency. If you're here to stay, come whole." Ryan nodded. He pulled an old keychain from his pocket. It was the toy he had given Noah that night at the hotel, their first connection. He dropped this. "I thought maybe I'd keep it for when he's older." She took the keychain gently. He's already grown more than we realize. Months later, a new morning was rising in New York. But it wasn't the city that mattered. It was the new home, in a quieter neighborhood, with white walls and children's drawings stuck to the fridge. Ryan was in the kitchen trying to make pancakes. Noah, now stronger, played with blocks on the rug. Eliza appeared with her hair up and a loose sweatshirt, holding 2 mugs. "Bad coffee or burnt pancakes?" she asked. "Surprise," he replied, laughing. She joined him. They sat together. The silence between them now was easy, without debt. Noah ran over with a drawing in hand. "Look, Mommy, it's us." Ryan took the paper. A colorful scribble. 3 people holding hands with a smiling sun at the top. He smiled, and this time there was no doubt in his heart. He hadn't just found Eliza. He had found himself. The reflection in the window showed 3 silhouettes. There was no more luxury, no more deals. Just one simple truth. They had started with a proposal and ended with a family. If this story touched you, share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear what it meant to you. Remember to hit the like and subscribe buttons. This is really important for the channel. Really important. And if you're ready for another story of love and hope, click the first card or the second one to watch the full playlist. See you there.